This is a quick walkthrough of the pre-release solution for the paper 2. So on paper 2 we have the Friends of Seaview. You're all familiar with that. Just a quick reminder, you must validate data on entry, use appropriate prompts for the entry of data, so ask them to enter data, and set out clearly your output and error messages, and variables and constants and other identifiers must have meaningful names, so no X and Y. So for task 1, we have to allow members to enter the first name and last name, and then they get to choose if they want to volunteer. So they have an option of not working as volunteer, and if they do work as volunteer, they can do the entrance gate, the gift shop, and painting, decorating, and they need to state the date of joining. It doesn't say which format. I'm going to use year, and whether or not they've paid their $75 fee. And it needs to be stored in suitable data structures, so a list or an array. So now I'm going to look at this first task, a solution to this first task, and here all I've done is put in some test data to allow me to test it. I have my data structures are name. I'm going to store the first and surname in a name list. Fee list, yes and no. This is my volunteer list. This is the where they'd like to volunteer with, and this is their join date, and they do this in the form of a year. So these are my data structures populated with some test data. So the first thing I do for this solution, and this can work for explain too. Explanations can be relatively short like this. But for what I do is I'm using a constant of 4 for my menu and 1 for the minimum menu value. And then I set a variable new record to C. It could be anything as long as it's not Q. And then I go into an outer while loop. So while new record is not equal to Q, because Q is going to be quit. And then I say that this is going to end the program. So I read in the name, enter your first name and surname. Don't actually need these two here. That's for a new line. So I'm going to get the name, and then I'm going to enter the date, and I'm going to check the length. So I have a validation check here, one type of validation check. This is optional. You should have some validation checks, but a length check is optional. So joined is assigned this value, and then it's a string, and then while the length of this is not equal to 4, because I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 digits need to be input. This is my length check. So while it's not equal to 4, I'm going to re-put it, re-enter it. In fact, I could do error and enter date. That way at least we know that an error has occurred and it's asking them to re-enter the date. So once the join date is valid, I go on and I ask them if their fee is paid. So I prompt them to enter that into a variable, and while it's not yes and not no, then I know they haven't put in yes or no, so I ask them to enter it again. And once again, I could, if I wish, type in error, so they know an error has occurred. And now a validated fee paid. Now the volunteer type, that's going to be an integer, and I'm going to put in 1 for gate, 2 for shop, 3 for paint, and 4 for not volunteering, because these are members. And while the volunteer type is less than the minimum, this is my constant, that's 1. You can see up there it says it's got the value 1. Or my volunteer type is greater than the maximum menu, which is 4. We can see it's 4. This is my constant. This is my range check. While it's out of the range, I'm going to write error, and I'm going to prompt them to enter it again. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's my volunteer type. So now I've gathered all of the data they asked for in task 1, and I'm going to simply add it to the list. I'm not using an array, I'm using a list, and I'm going to therefore take those variables that are validated and going to append them, use the append function, append them to the end of the list. Then I'm going to check for the end of the loop. Do you want to enter another record? Enter Q to quit. And I print this data out. This is not asked for, but I print it out just so that I can test this. And we can run through this once, and you can see I'm going to put in my name as Mike mouse, and I'm going to enter the date as 2022, and I'm going to say yes, I've paid my fee, and I'm not going to be a volunteer, so I'll type in 4, and then I'm going to enter Q to quit. I don't want to do another one. And then you can see I've just output the data. There's my test data, and you can see Mike Mouse 2022 4, and yes, the fee is paid, and that's task 1. Now I'm going to go on and look quickly at task 2, and so task 2, if we look at what it asks us to do, so task 2, we're extending task 1, and here what we're doing is we're going to have the list of the first names and last names of members. So these are basically outputs, reports. So members who have chosen to work as volunteers, pier gate, the gate entrance, the shop and painting, and people whose memberships have expired, so they've not rejoined this year. That's why I'm just using year. And members who have not paid their fee. So therefore, the solution to task 2 is, I'll just show you first how the join date works. I put this as a string, so while the join date is not equal to 2022, and we can see we have one that is not, I'm just printing yes to check my length. All of the range checks are in a for loop, and the length of, and I'm using the length of the lists for the for loop. So it's going to iterate through this. I run it, iterates through this. This one is just showing that I've got no, and 1 yes. That was just testing that this works. That's how it works, because I've got no, it's not out of date, no, and yes, and then no. So that's just demonstrating that it works. You can pause that and check it if you don't understand it. But here's the whole solution to task 2. First of all, I'm using constants again, and here my menu choice is going to be 0. So I go into my menu, I initialize it to a value, and while the menu choice is not 7, I have choices 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 choices for the reports required, and 7 is to quit. So this is how this is going to work. I can keep printing them out. So I read this in, and I validate it. This is a validation to check, once again, using these constants. It's a validation to check that it's between 1 and 7. Okay, so I get my menu choice. I validate it between 1 and between 7. And then what I do is, once I've done that, I go into this for loop. Now, we loop through all the records. They all have the same length. And I'm using len name list, which will work for all. Now, when they ask me to explain it, that's an explanation of this outer for loop. And that should be enough for the explain questions. So 0 to len name list. And you can see my name list there has 7 items. So that's my outer for loop. So if the choice is 1, so what is 1? We've got gate, shop, paint, and all volunteers. So if it's 1, then I'm going to look for the members that have 1, because the 1 indicates on volunteer list that they're on the gate. 2 indicates that they're in the shop. 3 indicates that they're painting. And so if the choice is 4, so if the choice 4 to show all volunteers, then in my volunteer list, 4 is actually somebody that's not volunteered. So therefore I say if the volunteer list has a value not equal to 4, then print the names. And that's everyone that has not volunteered. I've said this is everyone that has volunteered. So so if it's not equal to 4, because the people with 4, they have not volunteered. So we don't want them. And here, if the choice is 5, I'm looking, I've already explained how this one works. People whose join date is not 2022, I print their names. And if the person chooses 6, then I'm just looking for an entry of N. That's no, the fee is not paid. And then I print that, and then I come back here to the for loop, and of course I repeat that all, and so I repeat that all for the length of all the people on the list. And I'll run that, and you see I've got my menu. So let's see how many people are on the gate. Do this, and it tells me Gatey is on the list. I'll do another one. I've got shop, and I'll do shop. So on the list. Now let's do our range check here. So range check, I'm going to enter 0, and I should get an error message. Okay, and it tells me enter it again. I didn't actually put error on that one. And if I type in 8 as a choice, it's asking me to type it in again, but 7 should allow me to quit. And 7 allows me to quit, so that's done now. And now finally, the last one. Let's look at the last task. The last task is sponsoring Wooden Plank. So to sponsor Wooden Plank, what they need to do, they have to have a structure for the plank name and the plank message. So this is a person to their name and the message. So I'm going to have a temporary plank name, temporary message, and I'm going to set the message to OK to begin with. So while message, so that I can get into the loop. So while the message OK is equal to 2, and the reason I'm doing this is 1 is going to equal message OK, and 2 is going to equal message not OK. Because if the message not OK, then what I want to do is I want to keep looping through here and asking them to enter the message. So I ask them to enter the name, I put it into temporary variable, ask them to enter the message, temporary variable, and then I print it out for them to say whether they like it or not. And if they say it's okay, then I exit this loop and I come down here. If it's not okay, I come back and I print it out again. And I say, enter your name, enter your message. And I print it for them to verify, and I keep looping around until they're happy with it and they enter a 1. Once they enter the 1, I print the message of success, and the charge is $200. And then I assign these values to the list as it asked me to do. And this is just for testing purposes. And here's a test here. I entered name is Joe, message not cool. It displayed it. I said that it wasn't okay. I put in number 2 here to say it was not okay. So I entered Joe, and my new message was cool. It printed it out, and I said it was okay, and then it verified the message. And that's all 3 tasks for part A.